Now, typically I'll come in on audit and finance committees, but because I don't limit myself to those committees, I end up on other committees as well. And if I talk too much, I end up chairing those committees.
Hi, I'm Elisa Gomes, Deputy Chief Content Officer at Black Enterprise. Welcome to this all-new episode of Boardroom Chats, hosted by Nationwide. On this show, we sit down with the Black directors at the pinnacle of leadership and decision-making in boardrooms across America. We're extremely fortunate to have as today's guest, Independent Board Director and Strategic Advisor, Paula A. Price. She currently serves on the boards of 4 major global corporations: Accenture, Bristol Myers Squibb, Mondelēz, and Warner Brothers Discovery. And she's a former director of an additional 4 public companies, including Reddit and Dollar General. She's here today to share her views on the importance of board service and how she found her voice as a corporate director. Paula, thank you for joining us for this episode of Boardroom Chats.
Thank you, Elisa. It's so good to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Your board service is incredibly deep, but before we get into that, tell us about your career journey before becoming a corporate director.
Sure. My career journey has been quite varied. My most recent executive role was as CFO of Macy's, which includes Macy's, Bloomingdale's, and Bluemercury. And just before that, I was teaching at Harvard Business School. I had retired the first time. This is my second time, and thought that I wanted to have this different phase where I learned an entirely new skill, and that I wanted to do some of the things that I enjoyed most during my career, especially teaching and learning and mentoring young people. So I taught at Harvard Business School for 4 years, actually. And then before that, I was CFO of Ahold US, which is a supermarket company, the brands being Stop and Shop, Giant, and Peapod. Before that, I was at JP Morgan Chase and CVS Caremark. And I've worked in different functions, so general management, strategy, accounting, and finance, but mostly finance and accounting. I worked across different industries: consumer products, financial services, and retail, mostly consumer products and retail. And I've worked across geographies, the U.S. And in London. So all at global companies apart from one. So that's been my journey so far.
Wow. So far, I love the so far part of it. Is there like a third coming out of retirement, maybe?
One never knows. Although I have to say, I think I need a new word for this retirement thing because I'm plenty busy doing wonderful things. So, as you noted.
Yeah. You had such a successful career as a corporate executive. What made you want to be a corporate director?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say that I've always been passionate about governance and helping organizations scale and grow through disciplined financial and strategic management. And so after decades in the C-suite and senior executive roles, I really wanted to continue to bring those lenses into the boardroom. And what really attracted me was the opportunity to work at the intersection of strategy and risk oversight and long-term value creation across diverse industries. So long-term value creation is my thing. And I initially thought of it as creating value for the shareholder, but over the years, I've expanded that definition to include, the community, employees, customers, patients, and other stakeholders, because that's how we create shareholder value. We take the valuation of a company from point A to point B. So that's sort of been my interest in doing board service.
Well, I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone put it quite that way. How did long-term value creation become your thing?
That's a good question. Also, actually, all of your questions, I'm sure, are great. So, I would say, when I went back to school at Chicago, I really was trying to take my financial discipline that I'd gotten from DePaul University as an accounting major to a different level. And so the extension was taking the financial measures and really understanding businesses and understanding what drives shareholder value and making sure that the businesses are focused on those things. That's what was taught at University of Chicago. And so when I finished at Chicago, I really wanted to apply that as quickly as possible, as much as possible. And so that's been a long time ago, and that's exactly what I've been doing, no matter what my title has been through the years. It's helping companies to create shareholder value. And as I said, I just expanded on that to other constituents.
Yeah. If we, stay back at the beginning of your board service, how did you go about getting that very first public board position?
Okay, so that was really a long time ago. So my first board was a company called Charming Shops, and you may or may not remember, but they owned such brands as Lane Bryant and Catherine's and other plus size women's clothing. And I was working at Ahold, which is a retailer at the time, and they were looking for what they called a financial expert with retail experience. And so a recruiter called me, a recruiter that knew me from, wanting me to do different management type roles. And in the course of those conversations, I let the recruiter know that I was interested in doing director service and that I would like to be put in their database. And so that person put me in that company's database, and a different recruiter called me, and so I went and I talked with one person after the other, and it took a bit of time, but eventually they brought me onto the board. And then what I found was, after serving on that board and really trying to be a great board director, I would get additional calls. Some of the people were on that board. Others were different recruiters. Others were just people who knew my work. I would get those calls and I would entertain them. And so that's how I got onto my first board, and then, subsequent boards followed after that.
How was that first experience in reality compared to your expectations as you're going on your first board? Like, what did you feel like you were really well prepared for, or what, if anything, surprised you?
Yeah, I would say that the first board I really approached as a student. I approached it with a lot of humility. I tried to learn as much as I possibly could about the company before I ever showed up. Listening to earnings calls and, reading through their different investor scripts and anything I could find on the company. And then by the time I joined, they would give me the strategic plan. So combing through all of those things and really trying to ground myself in what makes the company tick, so that by the time I showed up on day one, I could practice finding my voice. This was my first board, and try to plug in at the most appropriate levels. I also watched the people around the room. So my first board, I really approached as a student before I got into the room. I continued to do that actually for every subsequent board. And that really stood me in good stead for having confidence to be able to speak on day one. It used to be the case that people would say, oh, your first board meeting, try not to say anything, maybe the second one too. And then, you can start speaking up. But people don't really pay you to sit in those rooms once a quarter. It's not like it's all that frequently to be quiet. So I really wanted to hit the ground running. I think what surprised me most about being in a board room was that, you really are a person kind of without portfolio, which is very different from being an executive. You influence without authority, right? So you have to really be constructive in how you approach your questions and frame your questions, because you want to have impact, but you're not doing. Like, you're not executing the strategy. And if you are in an executive role or fresh out of an executive role, it's really hard to manage that tension, because you're used to taking the strategy, participating in the strategy, and then owning it and executing it and doing. In this case, you think about, well, I always think about, I ask the questions of the team that I want them to ask of themselves. So I'm always thinking about, how do you frame the question? And so what I tend to do is I'll give them frameworks and principles. I'll say, have you thought about looking at the data this way, and what that would tell you about what drove value and what that tells us about going forward. And so when I'm asking them these questions, sometimes the answer to them is not as important as them asking it and finding new things themselves. And that's really what I'm trying to get them to do, is to ask deeper questions so that they find and discover more information and tools and data that will help them drive the business forward. So that tension between oversight and execution, I think, while everybody talks about it, for me was a little bit of a surprise as to how real that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm assuming that that first board experience was a positive one for you, because you said yes to a second, third, fourth. What was it that made you want to continue, adding boards to your portfolio?
Because I thought I could have value, and I saw on that board that I was having value, that the questions in that case, because the people they had such different backgrounds than I did in terms of their experience, that I was asking questions that needed to be asked, and actually having an impact. And they would come back with the analysis, or the discussion, and I was helping to move the peanut forward. And I saw that even from that chair, I could have value. The other way that I could have value was in helping them to form and perpetuate a good culture. And I think that intrigued me almost as much as the idea of helping them to create long-term shareholder value. So just understanding that I could indeed have value from that chair really intrigued me and motivated me to entertain additional board seats.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that after your first board, you started to get a lot of conversations that you would entertain coming in about additional boards. What is it about a particular board that attracts you? Like, when companies reach out, what makes you say yes?
Yes. So a lot of things have to come together. First, they have to have a good strategy, or acknowledge that they're working on it. They have to have potential to growth potential, a vision around it that resonates with me, not just with shareholders, but across the other stakeholders, the communities, the employees, the customers. They have to have a leadership team that I feel confident can execute the strategy, because as I just described, I don't get to execute. So I have to feel really confident in that team. And I have to respect the other board members, because when things go awry, you'll end up spending a lot of time with those people. And I have to respect and have confidence that we can be successful, and there has to always be chemistry. So all of those things have to come together. I love learning new things, so I believe I can add value across different industries. So I have to, I have to be able to get in and learn something new. I think about that in these board opportunities. So it's a number of different things that come together for me.
Yeah. Within boards, you've had such varied experience. You're currently serving on the audit, finance, corporate governance, and compensation, culture, and people committees. Can you break down for everyone how boards are structured and what you enjoy about each of the committees that you serve on?
Yeah, you do your homework, don't you? Boards typically have some standard committees. So audit committee, a nominating and governance committee, a compensation committee. Those would be the three standards. To that, you might see a finance committee, depending on what types of things they're involved in. You might see an M&A committee. Um, uh, in the case of Reddit, I was their IPO readiness committee chair. So you might see that because that's what they needed. And so they go through a process to determine, who can lead those committees. In fact, they go through that process before they recruit you. So they have in mind like what committees you can serve on, and sometimes they're really honing in on a particular committee. We're looking for an audit committee chair. Usually that's when I get those kinds of calls. And you don't share, you may or may not share them immediately, but they're thinking about their succession planning. So most boards will do a succession planning process, not only around the CEO, but also around the boards, the board members and the committee members. And so that's a typical structure, and they look at what you've done. Now, typically, I'll come in on audit and finance committees, but because I don't limit myself to those committees, I end up on other committees as well. And if I talk too much, I end up chairing those committees.
That's always like, the reward slash punishment for,
Exactly.
yes. What is it that that particularly sort of attracts you or that you find fulfilling about each of those committees that you serve on?
It depends on the committee, right? So in the case of Reddit, I was the IPO Readiness Committee chair, and they were at a particular moment where they were contemplating going public in the next 2, 3, 4 years or so. But they were a private company and they needed to develop public company infrastructure expertise, and they needed to get ready to interact with investors, to interact with a different kind of board. So they needed to get ready for that. I'd never done that before, and it was really wonderful to be able to help the team, which was a fantastic team, is a fantastic team, to get ready for such a big event that they have been working so hard for so many years. And so just being able to get in there and have an impact, their IPO was spectacular. So to be able to take just a little bit of credit for that was really good. And I think when I think about committees and how I think about, can I add value to the committees? I think about what it is they're trying to accomplish, and I really hone in on how we can do that.
Earlier, you mentioned culture and the opportunity that you have to help build company culture from the board. Every company has a unique culture. Does every board have its own culture as well?
Yes, they do, and it takes a little bit to figure out what that culture is. I mean, you can like all the people that are on the board individually, and that's kind of what you discover through the interviewing process. But you don't really know what the board culture is, what the board dynamic is until you get there, and you can see some boards, they're super inclusive. Everybody partakes in the discussion, and if not, then the lead director or the chairman or someone will invite other people into the discussion in one way or another. Lots of ways to do that. Other boards, maybe one or two people are dominating the conversation, and they're mostly making the decisions and wanting people to chime in and agree. They're not as effective at discourse. But I find that the most successful boards, whatever their culture is, I mean, they may meet outside and do things that are fun so that the board members get to know each other, or they may think that the board directors really value their time and don't want to do that sort of thing. Whatever that part of the culture is, in terms of how the directors engage with each other outside of the boardroom, I find that the most effective board dynamic and board culture is one where everybody participates in the discussion. If you hear somebody that's not, somebody brings them into the conversation, and that they have different worldviews and different perspectives, and we get the benefit of those perspectives on the different topics that we're talking about in the boardroom. And I choose my boards wisely. So I can say that all of my boards have fantastic cultures. The fact that these boards are in my portfolio is not an accident, and I'm really fortunate to serve on these boards and to have such great ones.
Yeah. Corporate boards are slowly getting more diverse, but when you first started serving on boards, there were very few Black directors, there were very few women directors. How did you navigate being the only in those rooms?
Well, I always knew that I wouldn't be the only for long, and that was my mission to make sure that that wasn't the case. And so I'm not usually bothered by, in terms of a performance level, by being the only, because I've been the only for so long. And so I'm really able to focus on value creation and whatever particular things I'm focused on. So I'm able to hone in on those things right away. In terms of the diversity, however, when I joined boards, there were women pounding the table about getting more women on boards. And I watched one woman in particular, just a fantastic woman. I watched how this is my first board, how she pounded the table asking for the data, and how she got the data, and how once she got the data, she went page by page, data point by data point with her questions. Every single quarter, she would ask about the data. And I said, and eventually we were getting results. And I said to myself, and I started doing the same. So right behind that, I would ask for not just at that company, I would pile on at that company, right? I would support her and pile on at that company. But at the other companies, I started doing that. I would ask for the data, and I'd say, I want to see the data. I want to see the data. And I want to see it once you give it to me. I want to see the data every quarter. And we talk about the data. I've never met a CEO that likes to see bad data stay stagnant. They always want to see it improve, whatever it is. And so little by little, we would see improvements, not just in the boardroom, but in the employee population. And we would look at pay equity and things like that. So I had a really great mentor in that regard. I really like the model. I am a data person. So that model resonated with me. And I've been doing that ever since. Let's look at the data. And when the opportunity comes to recruit for other board directors, same thing. The data is quite easy there. You just look around the table and you can do the math yourself. And we need more of this. I'm not shy about that. And most people know that's part and parcel of this package.
Yeah, yeah. And you said earlier that part of the reason is because the best functioning boards have a diverse set of backgrounds represented there, and they're all involved in the discourse. And so I know that, you preach it, fight for it, pound the table in your way. And we, of course, at Black Enterprise do the same. So we're sort of preaching to the choir with each other. But for all of those people out there who really need to hear it in this moment, can you talk about why it's important to have representation of different backgrounds on corporate boards?
Sure. I mean, as sad as it is to have to be having this conversation and saying this still, because over the course of my career, it's been the same conversation. The facts are, and the research shows, that when you have diverse perspectives, diverse worldviews, people coming with different experiences, you make better decisions. There's a ton of research that is links diversity to innovation. There's research that links diversity to product profitability. There's research that links diversity to improve stock price performance. I've been talking about diversity for some time now. I was on one conversation such as this with my alma mater, University of Chicago, and I said at the time the same thing I just said. There's a ton of research. And as I was talking in the group chat, people were putting their research in. They were or pulling somebody else's research, and you could just see scroll, 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 scroll. It's not just something that we're making up. You make better decisions. You get better outcomes with diversity of all kinds, of all kinds. And diversity is all about access and making sure that we have decisions that include everybody. And from that pool of people, all you have to do is choose the best candidate. If you have a diverse slate, and you will get diversity.
Sounds so simple, right?
Sounds so simple.
Yes. Well, you have served on so many public boards. What has serving on multiple boards taught you over these years about leadership?
Well, leadership starts with humility. I mentioned that before, the humility to learn, to listen, to understand, and to meet people where they are in an organization. It starts there. And then to have a vision about where we want to take the organization. And then being able to inspire people to execute and to come along with you on that journey. And so to me, leadership starts with humility, getting understanding, developing great relationships and partnerships along the way, inspiring people to grow and achieve value creation.
Yeah. We always like to end with dropping some knowledge, which you've been doing this whole episode. Thank you so much. The inner workings of boardrooms are a mystery to most people. Is there anything you would want the average person to know about corporate boards?
Well, the average person should know that board rooms and boards are not about rubber stamping. We make big decisions in those boardrooms. And, it used to be the case, I imagine, because people seem to think that it is true, that you had boards rubber stamping decisions. I've never in all of my years of service seen that happen, that board members are just rubber stamping. But we make big decisions. So I think it's important for people to understand that, everybody, whether you're outside of the firm, you should know that the directors in that move, they're making big decisions, right? And, we're making decisions about the future of the company. We're making decisions about, the future of leadership. We're making decisions that impact patients' lives. We make big decisions. And so getting to know the board from wherever you sit, whether you're an employee or someone outside of the firm wanting to work with that company, I think getting to know the board is a very good idea. It's a very critical part of an organization.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you, Paula, for sharing your career journey and your boardroom impact.
It's been such a pleasure, Elisa. Thank you for having me.
Of course. For more examples of power in the boardroom, check out Black Enterprise's annual registry of corporate directors under extras on blackenterprise.com. You can also find more episodes of Boardroom Chats on our website and on our YouTube. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time. For more than 5 decades, we've had your back. Boardroom Chats and Black Enterprise have everything you need to elevate your excellence.